Hey, this is Notser, and this is Untitled. This week we're going to talk about Pan-Asian Destroyer Line. I really have a lot of issues with it. I'm not under NDA yet, so I'm going to talk freely about it. We also have a little bit of anniversary discussion because I really enjoyed the event for the little I have played. And the reason I have played very little of it is because I went on vacation. Now, I don't want to sugarcoat this, and I'm not going to get too personal, but I'm feeling really crappy from that experience. I'm a young guy. You could probably infer what went down. I'm sure many of you have had something similar happen in your life, and I'm going to get someone who says, there's always more fish in the sea, right? And I'm going to go, you're absolutely right, but I still emotionally don't feel all the way there. So if I stutter, or I have, monotone voice, or I'm a little bit cynical, depressed, that's because I have to get over it. I appreciate all the support. Let's get started. So, we've got the Pan-Asian Destroyer Line, and it's coming out soon-ish. Super secret super testers have access to the line, and the line is going to be a 2 through 10 Pan-Asian collection of destroyers that formerly served the Soviet Union, United States, Britain, Norway, all these weird European powers and North American power that they don't need the ships anymore. It's just an excuse to get 2 through 10 represented in the game in some form to have a full line. Pan-Asians are going to be a conglomerate of different Southeast Asian countries, and I don't know the names off the top of my head, but the big ones are probably going to be there, and there's going to be some weird outliers, right? You'll be able to use a Chinese, you'll be able to use your Pan-Asian commander in a Chinese and move it to your South Korean because they fall under this massive umbrella of just Pan-Asian destroyers. So that's how that's going to work. Now, what is the big deal with the line, Notser? My issue is this. The Pan-Asian Destroyer Line is going to be using a special torpedo known as the Deepwater torpedo. This torpedo can only really do damage to battleships and heavy cruisers. DDs and light cruisers are basically immune to its damaging ability. They're too shallow in the water for the torpedo to do damage to them. So why make a torpedo that acts like this Notser? What's the benefit? It allows them to make the detectability of the torpedo more aggressive in favor of Pan-Asian. When you send these torpedoes, they will be much harder to spot, and they should do just as much damage as something like the Japanese torpedo line. For wargaming, and this is just inferring, for wargaming, the Japanese torpedo line is too powerful if it was designed fairly against the battleship line, because it does too much damage per torpedo to basically one-shot enemy DDs that it might hit. And whatever wargaming is, they don't like that a torpedo that you detect in probably 1.5 seconds will ultimately end in your death 100-0. So they nerfed the Japanese torpedo lines in response to that. When they nerfed the Japanese torpedoes, they basically made them too easy to detect. The combination of target acquisition, vigilance, hydroacoustic, aircraft, all of those combined really make it irrelevant for damaging on a battleship in any significant way. Now, obviously, battleships have died to torpedoes. But in general, the torpedoes are doing especially the Japanese, they're doing very insignificant damage for the reload cycle and the amount in the water. They're just too easy to detect. Now, the Pan-Asian Destroyer Line comes along, and what are they going to do? They're going to basically release a torpedo line that is similar to the pre-nerf Japanese torpedoes. Sorry for the language. I shit you not, these Deepwater torpedoes are basically going to be what the Japanese torpedoes were prior to the nerf. So when you say it like that, it feels really fishy, right? It feels like Wargaming recognizes that this is what is necessary to maintain strict balance against heavy cruisers and battleships, but they're not willing to go there because they're afraid that it might be too devastating to other destroyers or light cruisers. And I would just argue that there's not a huge epidemic of DDs and light cruisers that are just easily walking over everyone. I think that having strong torpedoes would be a good counter to a battleship population, for instance. I don't think that that's unfair. If the battleships feel like they're taking too much damage, well, they can spec into vigilance, target acquisition, hydro, all those things, aircraft. And I think that's exactly how the game should be. But for whatever reason, this aspect is just being overlooked by wargaming. Like, you don't need to have target acquisition, vigilance, combine all that, You don't need that to dodge torpedoes. But you damn well need that sort of layering to be effective with your AA protection or your concealment. So why are we just giving them a pass? If they're taking lots of torpedo damage, force them to go all the way in on this build. Don't allow them to exploit the fact that you're being soft on, hey, you don't need to take target acquisition. You don't need to take vigilance. Don't worry, we're not going to let these torpedoes be too powerful. And maybe that's the real issue. Maybe the real issue is that you're afraid that the destroyer lines, when they're camping in smoke, they're going to die to it. Well, you know what? Guess what? Shocker. If someone puts down smoke and they camp in it, they deserve to die to torpedoes because, wow, that is just torpedo me written all over it. That is just as dangerous as going into a capture point and expecting the enemy team not to recognize that someone is capturing it. I don't understand this mindset. So that's the first thing that's an issue with me on the Pan-Asian destroyer line. The fact that Deepwater torpedoes even exist, and comically, they are basically what the Japanese torpedoes were back in the day. Better concealment, higher damage. It's like, whoa, this is pretty offensive. To anyone who played and earned all the Japanese torpedoes, and then, oh, but, they can't do damage. Okay, yeah, whatever. Whatever. Use your guns to kill DDs, take out the battleships, which are the highest population, and you'll feel like you're going to be successful. On top of all that, they get radar and smoke. So this is another pet peeve of mine. Why are you giving smoke and radar to a line? We've talked about this. I don't really understand this. You probably look at the Belfast and you say, well, it's only got a 56% win rate. Okay. But I would argue that something like radar and smoke is not unhealthy because, oh, it's completely broken. It's unhealthy because it's frustrating to play against. There's very few counters that exist for you in that scenario. That's the real issue here, wargaming. It's not that, oh, it's going to get you a 60 or 70% win rate every game. No, it's the fact that you are basically allowing a class and a line the ability to ignore the negative aspects of using that concealment. And that's not how it should work. Every single skill should have a negative aspect to it. Heal has a cooldown, same with repair. You could be more vulnerable in that scenario, or you could use your heal too early or too late. That's healthy. For the aircraft, for battleships, it's a very small window that it protects you, and then it's a large charge time. For hydroacoustic, honestly, there's not a lot of negative to it. I'm going to be completely frank. The only thing I would say is that it's a very short range, so it makes you vulnerable when you use it to being close to the target, if you want to use it as a detection for the ships. For torpedoes, there's really nothing other than it'll be on cooldown. Then radar, the same. It's got a small window of effectiveness, but it has a long cooldown. The torpedo boost, basically you have to decide between smoke or torpedo boost. It's a really straightforward proposition there. It's just too easy to detect targets and kill them. And there's not enough protection for those targets. So when you offer radar to a line without any sacrifices in the ability, I don't have to choose between radar and smoke, for instance. You're really asking for it to be a dedicated anti-destroyer, and it's going to be even more painful to play against than some of the German DDs. Remember the German, well, you probably don't remember, but early on in the German destroyer line development, they had German hydroacoustic. German hydroacoustic has a very long range. It basically has 1 to 2 kilometer range on the standard tier for tier, and that's pretty significant. It was taken out of the game. The only one that gets it is the Z52, and I think that's just a token, you know, like we could list on German Hydro on the sales pitch, even though it's only on one ship. And that feels pretty powerful too in itself, but to have radar, to have something close to the black where it's 7.5, and it, yeah, sure, maybe it detects for 10, 15 seconds, but if you're calling out radar, hey, I'm going to use it right now, and everyone's ready to focus on the target, that guy's dead. Just straight up, he's dead. If I get a kill per cooldown, I feel like the consumable absolutely paid for itself. There's no reason to feel like I didn't get my my money's worth. So for a radar to be that effective, plus you are not personally detected when you use it, that's just too much, wargaming. I just don't think radar should be on a destroyer, and I don't think radar should be coupled with smoke. I just don't think it's healthy for the game. It's just not fun to play against, and that's my whole issue. Other than that, it's, you know, they're former American, former Soviet. They've got a varying degree of gun design, so they're going to have high arcs, or they'll be laser-like, depending on the tier. The torpedoes are really the unique trait that brings the whole line together. I doubt very seriously that they'll have the long smoke timers. They might even have German. I don't know. But to have radar, the torpedo systems, and to have the smoke in the way they are, I just think the line is going to be incredibly frustrating to play against. And there's really not a reason to believe anything other than that, in my opinion. I'm curious to hear what you think of Deepwater torpedoes, radar, and smoke on a destroyer line. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time.